wormholes, particle physics, extra dimensions. Are the wonders of so-called reality really what they appear to be? Or do we exist in an elaborate hologram? Is our universe the result of random activity or the result of intelligent design? If a creator was involved, can we discover him through our perception of divine order? This is Into the Multiverse with Josh Peck.
PSYOP is probably a term most of us are familiar with, but what about Satan's PSYOPs? Today in studio with me and, of course, my lovely, beautiful wife, Christina Peck, is Derek Gilbert. First time on this show.
I know. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate you.
Yeah, it's an honor
to the chair over here.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you on. Finally, you're pulling your weight. You know, I've been
carrying me for months, and
I've been saving you on Sci Friday, so
right,
finally you're here. But and of course, Christina Peck, and
I'm still here.
Yeah, just so we can just run through it real fast. If people haven't seen the show and this is their first time, where can they find us online?
You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Into the Multiverse. Or you can go to skywatchtv.com. You can scroll down, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see a picture of Josh and I. If you click on it, it will bring you right here to this channel. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Or if you have Roku, check us out on Roku under the Skywatch TV channel.
Yes, and make sure you subscribe. It's very important that you subscribe. You'll have access to all past, present, future episodes and some really interesting stuff that we have coming up that has not yet been released or discussed. So let's make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for that. I am so excited to have you in studio as our guest for the show. This is now I've had a chance to read your new book, The Great Inception: Satan's PSYOPs from Eden to Armageddon. I had to make sure I got that subtitle right. But I had a chance to read it, and it is phenomenal. And you know, I said this on the Skywatch TV episodes, which at the time of this airing aren't out yet, but depending on the order that these will get released, it may or may not be out. Make sure you check Skywatch TV for those episodes. But I said on there that it's not even that this is one of the best books on the topic. It's the only book. You know, you and Mike Heiser's book, Reversing Hormone, they're the only books on this topic. And because the subject matter is kind of obscure and not heard about, even though it is so important, what first got you interested in this?
Well, of course, Mike's book, the Unseen Realm.
Yes,
which
eye-opening.
Is foundational, and credit due to him, because that's really and his research into the Divine Council.
Yeah.
And I recommend people check out the website for a primer on the Divine Council, thedivinecouncil.com, where Mike has posted papers on what the Divine Council is. And essentially, it's a supernatural task force that carries out God's directives. Now, starting from there, you learned from Mike that after the Tower of Babel incident, where people rejected the authority of God, in my book, I argued that the Tower of Babel was, in fact, at a city called Eridu, which was known as the first city the ancient Mesopotamians knew. That was the very first city. When kingship was lowered from heaven, it descended at Eridu.
Okay.
There's an ancient temple there to a god called Enki. It is the oldest, the largest ziggurat in Mesopotamia.
And this is different than the ziggurat right now, where most people say that this, and I think that's in Iraq.
Right.
So this is totally different.
Right. And most people assume that the Tower of Babel was at Babylon.
Right.
Because the names are the same, and there's a big ziggurat there that's been, God Marduk, that must be the temple. Well, Babylon wasn't even in existence when the Tower of Babel was built. Okay. The whole point of that tower was to create an artificial holy mountain. And the book covers 8 different holy mountains. There are holy mountains all over the earth, but there are 8 that specifically impact the Bible, that are either mentioned in the Bible, or the one that is post-biblical is where Muhammad received his enlightenment.
Right.
But the final battle in history, the prophesied Battle of Armageddon, will also take place at a mountain, and that is specifically the Mount of the Congregation, the Mount of Assembly, the Temple Mount, Mount Zion, in Jerusalem. The whole point of the book, and starting with Eden, going through Babel and Sinai and Mount Hermon and the other mountains, is to show that these are key locations in the long-running war between the gods that God placed over the nations, who chose to rebel, and God, their creator. These gods are real. They revealed themselves to the ancient world under a variety of names, Enki, Enlil, Inanna, Anu, to ones that are more familiar to Bible readers like Baal, Molech, Chemosh, Dagon, Asherah. We can't identify them with any certainty because they lie, which is the whole point of a psychological operation, a PSYOP. But the goal of these entities, at the end of the day, is to confuse humanity into believing anything except the one thing that's true, which is that Jesus Christ is the way and the truth and the life and the only path to God the Father. They don't care if we believe in extraterrestrials or in occult systems or in the flying spaghetti monster. It doesn't matter because all of those paths lead to destruction.
Yeah.
And the book is just to point out that these gods are real and their actions have impacted archaeology, history. I mean, there are clues that they've left in secular history, secular archaeology that scholars who research the ancient world know about, but that information hasn't made it into the churches. So, Mike is blazing the trail. Dr. Heiser gets all due credit. I just took what he did and followed areas that I thought were really interesting.
Yeah.
And that's the result is the Great Inception.
Great.
Wow. Well, more on PSYOPs. Can you tell us a little bit more about PSYOPs and maybe give us some examples about some PSYOPs today?
Sure. The PSYOP is, again, just a term. An acronym refers to psychological operation, which is a military term describing a process by which you try to change the actions of a person or a group, your enemy, by feeding them information that is untrue or partly true. You change what they believe, you change what they do, because how we act, how we behave is based on what we believe. The irony, of course, is that the official term in the U.S. military is now military information support. So the actual term PSYOP has been the victim of a PSYOP because they don't want us to know they're messing with our minds.
Wow.
But the oldest PSYOP in the book, of course, is ye shall be as gods.
Right.
Which was a lie. But that was the lie fed to Adam and Eve by the Nakash, the divine rebel in Eden. If you eat this fruit, you'll be just like Yahweh. You'll be like God. And that changed what they believed, so it changed their behavior. Oh, well, we weren't going to do this, but now that we know this lie, we'll do this what we weren't supposed to do. Today, we get this lie from our churches. Even.
Right.
There is no hell.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
We're all going to be saved. This universalist lie. We're all on the same path to God.
Yeah.
We worship the same God as fill in the blank of another religion.
Yeah.
Those are PSYOPs. The goal is to get us to reject the authority of the Bible, which is the Word of God. And once we separate our beliefs from this ultimate source of truth, we're liable to believe anything.
Right.
And then wander off into destruction.
Wow.
So Eden was one example. What are some other examples of PSYOPs that we might be able to find in the Bible, like ancient PSYOPs from the enemy?
Well, many examples. Really, any alternate religion is an example of a PSYOP. The belief that if you perform a specific sacrifice, other than the ones that were given to the Israelites by God, Yahweh through Moses said, okay, here are certain feasts and festivals that you must keep. Here are certain sacrifices for the remission of sin. And of course, in the New Testament, we know that, especially through the book of Hebrews, that ultimate sacrifice has been performed once and for all time with Jesus Christ on the cross. But in the Old Testament, well, in history rather, outside the Old Testament, even in the Old Testament, we see that there were examples of, for example, the prophecy of Joshua, that whoever rebuilds the walls of Jericho will do so at the cost of his oldest son and his youngest son. And we find that is actually fulfilled. And that was a practice that was not uncommon in the ancient Near East, where a child would be sacrificed under the corner of the foundation of a new building. The Amorites had a tradition of sacrificing donkeys and horses and burying them under. And that's how, by the way, in the book I mentioned that we know that the rulers of Egypt at the time of Israel's sojourn in Egypt were this group of people called the Amorites. That God said, Abraham, your descendants will return from this land in the 4th generation because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete.
Yeah,
Wow.
what's that all about?
That's a really fascinating aspect, and that led me to a whole bunch of stuff in the book. When you start digging into the Amorites, and you realize that scholars have known for 100 years that there was a period of history from about 2000 BC until about 1600 BC where the Amorites dominated the ancient Near East. Now, if you're looking at a map, that would be everything that we know today as Egypt, the Levant. Levant is Jordan, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, Kuwait. Basically, that whole area was dominated by the Amorites. Sometime around the year 2000, and scholars don't know yet, there's a period, kind of a dark period of about 100 years there, where you begin this period with the last kings, the last Sumerian kings of Mesopotamia, in charge of what became known later as Babylonia. And suddenly when the fog lifts around 1900 BC, whoa, it's Amorites everywhere.
Wow.
Syria, the coastal states, what it came to be called Canaan, all under the control of Amorites. And then around 1750 BC or thereabouts, this group of Canaanite or Semitic-speaking people moved into Egypt and took over northern Egypt. And they brought their god Baal with them, which is why the parting of the Red Sea is significant. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But these Amorites, essentially, for a period of about 400 years, were the dominant people group in the ancient Near East. They controlled everything. But the most significant thing, I think, is that they founded Babylon. Now,
Wow.
Babylon is a name that is mentioned. It's the most often mentioned city, second only to Jerusalem in the Bible.
Yeah.
It appears in the Old Testament, it appears in the New Testament, it appears in Revelation. Mystery Babylon. We just talked to Joel Richardson about his book.
Yes.
How do we identify Mystery Babylon in the future? It has become a byword for occult spiritual wickedness that will dominate the world in the end times. Well, the thing is, there is no ethnicity called Babylonian.
Right.
The Babylonians were just the people who lived in Babylon. I'm a Chicagoan. That doesn't mean I'm ethnically Chicagoan.
You can't find that in your
Right.
in your genetic code or anything.
I'm German, English, Swedish, Welsh, and a few other things.
Right.
I just happened to be born there. The city of Babylon was an unimportant little village on the bank of the river until about 1800 BC, when an Amorite chieftain conquered a couple of neighboring cities. And it wasn't even until like the 5th king of Babylon that they started calling themselves the king of Babylon. That's how unimportant the village was.
Wow.
It wasn't until about 1750 BC, thereabouts, when Hammurabi the Great, who issued the famous law code, that Babylon became a big deal. But the Babylonians were Amorites. They were the ones who founded that city, founded that kingdom, founded that occult system that is the symbol of spiritual wickedness that has been for 3,000 years, 4,000 years, and will be until the end of time.
Wow.
What's really significant is that about the year 1406 BC, which was the time of the Exodus, or the time of the conquest of Canaan, actually, when Moses and Joshua were leading the Israelites to Canaan. Of course, they had a couple of kingdoms on the east side of the Jordan that they conquered. Moab, Edom, and Ammon were all off limits. God said, you can't touch them. Ammon and Moab are descendants of Abraham's nephew Lot. Edom was Jacob's brother, Esau. I've given them this land for an inheritance. You can't touch them. But there were two Amorite kingdoms east of the river, Sihon of Heshbon and Og of Bashan. Sihon,
Well, that sounds familiar.
yes. Og was, Sihon, when you read the Bible, I didn't miss this until I was researching the book. Sihon was so well known that there was actually a song, according to the Old Testament, that was sung by the balladeers about how Sihon, a fire had gone out from Heshbon and consumed Moab. And
Oh.
So
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
he was famous back in the day, but the Israelites took him out. Og of Bashan was the same. Always wondered why. And this is something Mike Heiser put in The Unseen Realm, which I thought was fascinating. Why did Moses feel it was important to put the dimensions of Og's bed
Right.
Yeah.
in the account of the conquest of Og of Bashan? It's because the dimensions of the bed, 4 cubits wide by 9 cubits long, doesn't mean Og was 13 and a half feet tall. Those dimensions were the same exact dimensions as the bed of Marduk in his temple, the Entemenanke, the temple of the meeting of heaven and earth in Babylon, where every year on the Akitu festival, the New Year festival, Marduk and his consort Sarpanit would come down and have ritual lovemaking during this 12-day occult festival to celebrate the new year.
Wow.
It was a reference that tied the bed of Og and the occult system of Babylon to Og, king of the Amorites, the last of the Rephaim.
Wow.
That was the significance.
That's what makes that significant. That's amazing. Is the church suppressing information? Why don't we ever hear this in church? Well, we might have the answer to it, or at least an idea. But before we get to that, I want to show you how you can get a hold of this important information right here at Skywatch TV. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more Into the Multiverse right after this.
I will ascend into heaven. The war began in Eden when the dragon, known as Nakash, lured Adam and Eve into sinning with the lie. Ye shall be as gods. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. Soon, humans multiplied upon the earth, and rather than worship God, they fell down at the feet of dragons. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation. But it wasn't enough for the dragons. They wanted to do more than just own mankind. They wanted to destroy them, to forever keep them from re-entering the divine council. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. The war raged on, where fallen angels descended onto mountaintops, spreading fear and false doctrine. It is a war for the souls of men, and only a Savior's blood could change the outcome. I will be like the Most High. Satan and his minions go by many names and wear many faces, but their strategy has always been to imitate God's truth. We call this war for men's minds the Great Inception. Learn the secret history of the spiritual war. Learn the names of the deceivers and what their true aims really are. Learn where they have struck and where they will strike again before it's too late. The Great Inception.
We're in the middle of a battlefield surrounded by an enemy that we've been told doesn't even exist. The pagan gods are imaginary, we've been taught, just lifeless blocks of wood and stone. The Great Inception shatters that illusion. It took me 2 years to pull this information together, research into archaeology, history, ancient languages, to show that the Bible stories you've known since childhood are actually literal accounts of supernatural warfare between God and the rebel gods who decided to reject the authority of their creator. My hope is that after reading The Great Inception, you come away with just one question. Why haven't we heard this in church before?
You've been fighting in a war against an enemy you've been told doesn't even exist. Skywatch TV wants to change that to prepare you for the battles ahead. Beginning March 7th, exclusively from Skywatch TV, the Cosmic War Collection finally arrives. Featuring 3 groundbreaking books, a 5-hour DVD, and a 7-hour audio series showing you how real the supernatural War of Kingdoms actually is. Reversing Hermon by acclaimed Bible and ancient language scholar Dr. Michael S. Heiser, and The Great Inception by Skywatch TV's Derek P. Gilbert. You'll learn how Christ's full mission has been misunderstood for 2,000 years. Not only did he come to shed his blood to redeem mankind, Jesus was on a mission to reverse the sin of the angelic watchers who descended on Mount Hermon. You'll also discover how Bible stories you've known since childhood were literal battles in the spirit realm between God and the gods who rebelled. When you order the Cosmic War Collection from Skywatch TV, you'll receive Reversing Hermon by Dr. Michael S. Heiser, The Great Inception by Derek P. Gilbert, a new, exclusive, never-before-offered deluxe hardcover collector's edition of the Book of Enoch, The Real Clash of the Titans DVD, a special, never-before-released video compilation with 5 hours of teaching on the long war between God and the gods. And The Unseen Adversary, a brand new audio series on MP3 disc with 7 hours of Derek P. Gilbert interviewing Dr. Michael Heiser on the Watchers, UFOs, and the Great Cosmic Rebellion of Satanic Forces. A value of more than $100, yours for just $29.95. The Cosmic War Collection, available beginning March 7th only from Skywatch TV. Know your enemy. Order the Cosmic War Collection beginning March 7th by calling 844-750-4985 or log on to skywatchtvstore.com.
Welcome back to Into the Multiverse. We are speaking with Derek Gilbert. If you haven't had a chance to do so, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, you can actually click on the little subscribe button in the corner of your screen. If you're watching on Roku or the Skywatch TV website maybe, go to youtube.com/Into the Multiverse and make sure you subscribe. We have some exciting things coming up as always, so you want to make sure you do that. Well, I definitely want to jump back into it, but I should probably let you ask the question. Well, it's funny because we actually get comments sometimes. People think I don't let you talk, but...
No, you do. You do.
Well, it's like in my house, the wife is the smart one.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we can talk a little bit about head binding. What evidence can you tell us about head binding and how it's related to the evil purposes?
This was not something I expected to find when researching this book, but... and of course, we know L.A. Marzulli has done a lot of research on the oddly shaped skulls of the Paracas in Paracas, Peru. And what was the deal with those people? And those have been dated to about 500 BC. Mm-hmm. But what I found in looking at the history of the culture that preceded the Uruk expansion, which would be about the time of Nimrod, a culture called the Ubaid culture. And again, this is something scholars know about, but we never talk about in church. Mm-hmm. We're in speculative territory because we don't know much about the Ubaid culture because they hadn't invented writing yet. We don't know why they did what they did because they couldn't write it down.
Right. It is Into the Multiverse. Usually we deal with quantum physics, so we are no strangers to speculation.
Right.
But this culture spread out from this first city, Eridu, where they had the temple to Enki, which I argue was the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
That was ground zero for the Ubaid culture, which spread out from there into what would be Syria, Iraq, Syria, southern Turkey, western Iran. From there. The period of history that we're talking about is roughly 6,500 BC till about 3,800 BC, thereabouts.
Wow, so really old.
Yeah, and I'm using the standard dating of secular scholars.
Sure.
And I do that specifically so that they don't dismiss it out of hand as, this is some crazy creationist who thinks the world is only 6,000 years old.
Right.
I don't know.
Same here.
I don't know.
Right.
But anyway, what they have found is in excavating these Ubaid culture sites, and specifically at Eridu, but all over the ancient Near East, they have found that the practice of head binding, of cranial deformation, was universal. It was practiced almost everywhere, and it crossed all class boundaries. Apparently, in other words, they can't discern a difference between, say, a priestly class that bound their heads to make them into cone heads,
right?
Or the poor. I mean, basically everybody did. At Eridu, in fact, there were the last expedition to Eridu was in 1949. Now, there's a current expedition now, a joint Iraqi-Italian group is working there again, and I'm really interested to see what they find.
Yeah.
But 1949 was the last major expedition, and they exhumed 206 sets of remains.
Oh, wow.
Out of, I don't know how many they found, it was a couple thousand, but they pulled up 206 sets of human remains. 206 out of 206. I'm not good at math, but that I think is 100%. All of them had deformed skulls.
Wow.
Cranial deformation, the practice of head binding to create these odd-shaped heads was universal. Why do that? You know, who in 6000 BC says, honey, we could invent writing today, but I know, let's see what happens when we wrap this around Junior's head really tight. Why would they do that?
Yeah.
But the other thing that's really curious is and this is something else. We only get answers from the ancient astronaut crowd.
Sure.
The discovery of hundreds of what they call Ophidian figurines. Now, Ophidian is just a fancy word that means snake-like.
So those are those little like snake-like figurines that they show on those shows a lot.
The little reptilian-looking figurines.
Yeah.
They're biped. They've got pointy heads, very reptilian or lizard-like features, but they're doing mammalian things, like you see a female, suckling a young.
Right.
No, that's a mammalian thing. That's not something that lizards or reptiles do. The only place where they found those is around the city of Eridu and the nearby city of Ur, which was another one of the ancient cities of ancient Sumer. They found about 150 of those all told, but they're all concentrated in that area. Why there? Why the head binding to create the conical skull among those ancient people? What were they trying to do?
Yeah.
And why did this practice continue for so long? Because according to the scholars who admit that there hasn't been a lot of research into this, there really has been no serious, in-depth study of this practice.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. But I probably, if I had to guess, because for scholars in academia who have PhDs and reputations to protect, this starts getting into the area of what they call woo. Yeah. Oh, this is weird stuff. This is ancient astronaut territory. We don't want to be associated with that. But the few papers that I found on this practice indicate that the ancient Near East, what we call today Iraq, southeastern Iraq, was ground zero for this practice, and it was universal from about 6,000, well, going back to about 10,000 BC. When they found deformed skulls at ancient Jericho, at ancient Byblos, which is on the coast of Lebanon, in Turkey, in western Iran, and then again in what we call today Iraq. Everybody did it. They did it for about 6,000 years until about the time of the beginning of the Uruk expansion, which I put like right after the flood. So right about the time of the flood, the practice stopped. Now, it picked up again later because we got the Chinook Indians here in North America. We got the Peruvian skulls. We got other places where it picked back up again.
So are they practicing on like an old tradition or something? Or
don't know. My guess, and this is sheer speculation, that they were trying to emulate a look that they saw in the gods. That's my guess. It is only a guess because they didn't leave any written records. They didn't know how to write. But before they learned how to write, they learned how to shape their children's heads into little cones. And they did it for 6,000 years.
They wanted to be like gods.
Yes.
Yeah, it's strange, and it also speaks to, because I've heard people say, well, it was probably just stylistic of the time, like how we might have goatees today. But not everybody has a goatee, Not everybody likes that style.
And the trends change periodically. Women's fashion, men's fashion.
Every couple of years.
Men's fashions, our suits aren't all that different from where they were in the 30s. But you go back to the late 19th century, 100 years, things change. 6,000 years. This was a standard practice.
So it's got to be something deeper than just they liked the look.
That's my guess.
Yeah. Wow. So we only got about a minute left, but what would you want most for the audience to take away from this episode?
That the spirit realm is real, that there were gods created by God. If you want to think of them as fallen angels, that's fine. But they were created by God. They were given authority, some responsibility, and they rebelled against that authority. And then Psalm 82 shows what happened to those who decided to abuse the authority that they had been given, the responsibilities they've been given. God says, you are gods, all of you sons of the Most High, but you will die like men and fall like any prince. They've been condemned to death. A day is coming when God will judge the world, and part of that is the death of the gods.
Wow. Wow, fantastic stuff. Well, stay tuned because Derek will be joining us in a future episode. But thank you for watching. As always, thank you for joining us into the Multiverse. Till next time, take care and God bless.